Greetings, people of the internet. It is I, a nerd named BT. Pleasure to be once again returning to you in my fuzziest of forms. Today we have a very special video today, other than it being vocalized through my very lovely vocal cords. It shall be a discussion of the most awkward rush duel fusion monsters in the game. Now, we've only had fusions for a short while now, but we have enough to compare other cards to and to personally have opinions of what they are. Now, speaking in terms of Rush, since it is currently a fairly recent game and has come upon us long after the creation of Yu-Gi-Oh! And many other formats, Konami's done a very good job in making fusion monsters not that bad. Similar to Synchro monsters when they first came out, there are hardly any really bad Synchro monsters. So, of course, I can't really make an entire list saying what are the worst fusions. So, to make it more fair for the fusion monsters themselves, we shall be discussing what are the most awkward fusion monsters to summon or have the most awkward effect or fusion materials. So, of course, there's no real listing of these things from best to worst or most awkward to least. I am just going along with the way they are ordered before me, otherwise known as through attack and what I have on the script, which may or may not exist. So of course, first up we have the Flame Swordsman. So most of you will be thinking, of course he's very awkward to play because he is basically a vanilla with 1800 attack. Well, you're mistaken, he is a fire warrior with 1800 attack on a level 5, which is pretty good. Plus, the fusion materials are both normal monsters, so, of course, as many fusion monsters like, they can be summoned off Parallel Birth Gate. Now, what makes this card very awkward to play? Because if the Fire Warrior is good enough to have its own deck, then of course there's nothing wrong with it. The issue at hand is the fusion materials. Besides off Parallel Gates, the monsters themselves don't mix. Flame Manipulator is a level 3 Fire Spellcaster, while Masaki the Legendary Swordsman is only a level 4 Earth Warrior monster. No real correlation between the two, and no Fire Warrior to really help boost off Flame Swordsman's usefulness in playing in a Fire Warrior deck. And with Flame Manipulator as level 3, that means not many people have a reason to play him. Contrary to popular belief, level 3 is really not too well supported as a generic sense, though you do have some good level 3 support as Follow from the Fiends. He only has one card to really summon. So the whole reason Flame Swordsman is on this list is not because he has no effect, but rather his fusion materials have no connection to each other or the fusion monster itself, so it makes it really hard to build a deck around them. Trust me, I've tried 5. Up next we have, from one of my favorite series of cards, Sports Dragon Kickbase Master. Now most of you all are probably saying, oh, this is odd, why would you put this on here? Because the Sports Dragons are amazing, they have a lot of powerful cards. You are correct, but here's the issue at hand. Kickbase Master is very odd. You can fusion summon it with Sports Dragon Slugger and Sports Dragon Striker. Then the requirement for the effect, shuffle back one Sports Dragon Pitcher or one Sports Dragon Defender from your graveyard into the deck, destroy one small drop card on the field. Now, straight away you realize there's up to 3 to 4 cards needed to make this work, and that kind of makes it fairly off-putting because you can't just play the fusion materials, you need to play at least 1 to 2 other cards of different names to activate his effects. Though of course you can make the argument that you will be playing Pitcher and Slugger in the same deck, but then you have a Striker that does almost nothing. And the only real way to get back either of the Sports Dragons like Striker can be obtained through Sports Dragon Connection, which is a reborn spell for any level 5 or 6 normal Dragon type monster, and if you have the Sports Dragon Keeper on your field, you can add one of the 2 Sports Dragons from your graveyard to hand, being Striker or Defender. Now the entire reason, as I said before, this effect is very costly in terms of deck space just to pop a singular spell and trap card. Though I do appreciate a secondary boss monster, it in itself does not really support the deck, and just is very hard to use. Of course, the two other sport dragons, they summon each other, so they would make a significantly better fusion. But getting back the material of Striker, while also having a defender or pitcher engrave, can cause a few other problems. Up next, we have the Winged Celestial Dragon, Wheel and Woe. Now this is a card that I've played many times over, and I've seen other people have heavy arguments over whether or not we can play it. The fusion materials for this are the Coiled Dragon of Fertility and the Coiled Dragon of Destruction. Requirement: shuffle one worm monster from your graveyard into the deck. Send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. If you send a spell to the graveyard by this effect, add up to 2 field spells from your graveyard to your hand. Now there are many contradictory effects in this. First off, this does not support its fusion materials in the slightest. The fusion materials are based around shuffling field spells from the grave or the field back into the deck, then inflicting burn damage. Then, while the boss monster itself gets those field spells back to your hand and mills your deck. So, the reason this whole thing is awkward is because it does not really do anything related to the fusion materials. The fusion materials get rid of the field spells, so there might not be any field spell to get back from your grave. Which is a very odd choice, I must say, from Konami. Understandably, if you're playing a sort of worm deck, or in this case, a Coiled Dragon deck, you are more than likely playing multiple copies of different field spells, but at the same time, most worm decks prefer not to play too many copies of field spells nowadays, especially since there isn't much reason to. And some of the field spells just don't really have much use for a fusion monster like Wheel and Woe, considering the fact that one of them is for tribute summoning, that it can't be tribute summoned. So the whole point of this card being on this list is that it has a contradictory effect against the fusion materials listed. As they get rid of the field spells, there's nothing to add back to your hand. Finally on this list, we have Aether the Fast Striker, or Aether Fast Striker. This was a very exciting reveal for me. I was quite excited, but then after reading the effect, I was put in a bit of confusion. Of course, the fusion materials are Aether Seeker and Aether Finder. Requirement: you can place 1 fusion from your graveyard to either the top or bottom of your deck. Effect: this card gains 600 attack till the end of the turn, then you can place a normal monster from the graveyard to the top of your deck. Now of course this seems like a very simple and decent effect, but then you once again must realize this is another monster that contradicts the entire archetype, or the entire series in this case. So the way that the main deck Aethers work, Aether, I am unsure myself, is that you send a spell and draw card from your hand to the graveyard, then use your primary effect, which is basically stab modification, then a secondary effect if you have fusion engrave. So getting rid of fusion engrave means that you disable both of the fusion materials. And of course both fusion materials are effect monsters, so what exactly are you getting back from this effect? You place 1 normal monster from your graveyard to the top of the deck that can either be summoned back with Parallel Gate or Secret Order. Now granted, he does have the luxury of having Aether Finder, who summons Aether Seeker from the graveyard, which makes it significantly less difficult to play compared to the others. But its effect in general contradicts the deck and does not really have any relation to the monsters themselves, or doesn't really give you much advantage. Of course, getting a 3000 attack monster is pretty good, but there's a lot cheaper ways to do it, and it's just fairly difficult to play since there's not really any current need for either to put a normal monster on top of the deck. But we shall await future support from it, as they are a series of cards that are getting a support card every single set for some odd reason. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this very vague listing of some of the most awkward Rush Duel fusion monsters. If you wish to hear more things like this, just leave a like on the video or comment it down below. Hope you all have a good day.